So now that we've staged the data, we're actually ready to load it into a normalized model in the data warehouse. But we don't have any model yet in the data warehouse, so we will be using the anchor modeling tool to create a model, and this is what the tool looks like. It opens up with the example model, and it's using a force-directed graph layout algorithm, so it's very flexible and easy to work with. It will lay out itself. It finds an equilibrium and settles down. Really nice and fun to work with. But we're going to start with a new model now, so I'm going to click that. And looking at the data that we have, if you look over here, we have the players that are playing golf, and we only have a single attribute for them. So let's create a player anchor like that, and with a single attribute, which is the name of the player then. If I can spell it correctly. And let's do it a varchar 555. We'll keep the source format in this case. Okay, and this is basically the model that I'd like to start with. I'm going to build this iteratively, so maybe one or two or three, more than one, 2 or 3 iterations. So we're going to generate the SQL code for this one. I'm going to include the business views. I'm going to use the unitemporal because I don't need the bitemporal stuff here. So unitemporal and everything else looks fine. I'm going to generate the SQL code for this model. And now that I have this one, I'm going to open up a window in the Golf data warehouse. And we're going to paste all the code there and click execute. And if I look at this now, I will have a lot of views and stuff here, a lot of stuff from the metadata, of course, because that's where we kept the metadata model as well. But here's the latest player view, for example. So I can select the top 1000 rows there, but you can see right now it's just a player ID and a name, and we haven't populated this with any data yet. So the next step is to actually populate this nice model that we have with some data. So we go into the target folder, and this is where you actually do the source to target mapping. So in this case, I'm going to name this target here LPL player. Oh, I'm sorry, this is, no, this is the some stats data that we have. Target database, this is already set from the variables.bat file. So let's see, the source data is in system source. The name of this table, I think it was Kaggle, that was system source. That should be populated by itself. Oh, I forgot to run the staging. Let's run the staging job. Step 1, start. Alright, so while that is working, we'll continue here. Oh, it didn't find any file because I didn't move it back. So we'll go to the data folder. Now in the archive is where we have the CSV file. I'm going to put it back in the incoming there. Alright. Start job at step 1, start. Alright, so we'll continue working here. So in the case here, we want to select some particular part of the data here. We need to actually do a small bit of transformation, because if we look at the data that we have here in the table that we're using, just going to rename that to stats, and the target table in this case would be the player latest view, because this table has an insert trigger on it, so we can use it just as we would a regular table and do inserts into it. So anyway, we need to find the unique player names, because that's the things that we want to put in here, and for each unique player name we want to create a player instance in the anchor. So I will do a simple select distinct player name from, and it's I can use this actually. And I can even do like this if I want to. And this will pick up whatever you defined in your variables .bat file. So that makes it really easy if you for some reason want to switch the names of the databases or things like that. Really simple to do. So in this case I want to map the player name to, in this case, what the name is in the player anchor. So it will PL name, oops, pasted the wrong thing, player name, like that. This is the natural key. So we're gonna assume that there are no two players have the exact same name. If they do, we will confuse them in that case. So there will be some metadata that we want to also keep in here. So metadata PLID. Okay, now the job is done. I'm going to close that. And we could either grab like the metadata I think there's a metadata column here, metadata JBID, for example. Then we would store the job identity corresponding to this staging job that ran, but we can also store it on a more granular level if we want, which is like the actual job step in here, but then it's the work ID. I'm just going to use this one from the source, which is metadata JBID, change it like that. So we need to select oh no, let's do it like this. Easier. So I'm going to use this work ID. So this is magical. You wouldn't know that it was there unless I actually typed it in like I did now, but it's a variable that gets set every time. Oh, I did the wrong thing here. I need this. This is what I want here. This part is of course the target column, like that. And target column is not named that. The target column is metadata PL, not ID. All right, so now let's see. We don't want any particular conditions on this one, so I'm going to remove that. We don't do any pre-processing or post-processing. We could create temporary tables that we could use in both parts. So I'm going to remove all of the other stuff that was from the previous example that we used as a template. So I'm going to save this. Okay, so now in the target we have a single target defined here, which is loading the player anchor. So I'm going to go back here to the sisulator, and I'm going to add the T over here. I can remove this completely because then it will install everything, but let's just do the T and the W, so it will be the targets and the workflow, like that. Oh, actually that's a good thing, because otherwise it will, if I do the staging again, it will actually delete the staging tables, so you will have to rerun the staging, and we don't want to do that. So let's just make sure that we have it here. Yeah, the table is still there. So now I should have a loading job here, so we can look at the properties of this job and see that it has some steps. Oh yeah, this is my bad. didn't correspond to what I was thinking. Go back to workflow XML. Of course, this is the workflow, and here we're defining the actual job that will end up in the SQL Server agent. So the PGA Kaggle loading will now load all of the stuff from the previous example, which is not what we want. So I'm going to delete those steps. And we want to load the player anchor instead. So load players. We'll name it, the job will be named that, and this will be LPL player. And it was the stats table here. And the job agent will pass parameters. So this is actually a variable created over here. So you can create variables within your XML files as well if you want to propagate them down the hierarchy. So in this case, this is what it will pass into the store procedures that the job that is running, and that's how it's actually able to keep track of and connect with the actual running job, so we can store stuff like that in the metadata tables. Alright, so that should probably work much better. I'm gonna do the same thing here again, reinstalling it, and now if we look at this job, it should have different steps, and it doesn't. Why? Maybe I need to do some sort of refresh. No, still using the same things. That's really weird. Oh, you see that little dot there? It means it's unsaved. So if you make changes and don't save them, it's not gonna show up, of course. So now if we go into steps, here it is. So you can see here the load players, and if I open up this particular step, you can see what it's doing. It's doing what we specified down here. It's executing this, but it's done some variable substitutions here, and at the end you should see that it's actually passing those parameters that we defined, also that variable. So let's run this and see what happens. So once we have the players loaded into the data warehouse, the next step is of course to extend this and add the statistics as well to the model. So now looking at this query that we had here with the latest players, now you can see that we have 1000 players in here connected to some identifier that we've created for them in the anchor. The top player, or the first one, happens to be Francesco Molinari. So in the next video we'll do the second iteration and extend this model, extend the loading procedures to actually load the statistics also into the data warehouse. So I'll see you then.